Hi, everyone. I'm Martha Rich. I'm a member of the Grafton County Executive Council from Enfield, and I'm kind of your host facilitator tonight. So thank you so much for joining this candidates forum sponsored by the Upper Valley Democrats and Mascoma Forward. We're going to hear tonight from Democrats who are running for Grafton County offices. These are the people that we're working really hard to elect. And we know that they're ready to work really hard for us after that. So just a few notes about how the evening's going to go. I'm going to encourage you to stay on mute. And also you may wish to choose speaker view because we have a lot of people here and we're asking you to pay close attention to these 7 speakers. We have 7 candidates tonight. I'm going to invite each one to speak and give their own introductions, tell you about their history and their plans. And then each candidate will have an equal amount of time to answer questions. We're going to ask you, the audience, please to put your questions, write them into the chat. We only have an hour tonight, and that's the most efficient way to do it. And I'm sorry we won't hear your voices in person, but please put your questions in the chat. Deb Nelson, my colleague here tonight, will review those questions and ask them to the candidates. We also have a timer. Deborah Merrill Sands will have that role. And candidates, she'll let you know when you have a minute to go in your time, just to give you that signal. We also have a set of general guidelines for the evening. These are the ones that we use in public gatherings that are sponsored by Grafton County Democrats and the regional groups. Just 4 basic principles that we like to share with you that we think help make meetings go as well as they possibly can. The first one, I'll just say it and you'll see it on the screen in a minute, is that we're going to treat everyone with respect. That means listening carefully, not interrupting, avoiding personal attacks. These are values we hold. So we're going to treat people respectfully. The second one is we're going to help all voices be heard. That's tricky in a 1-hour session. But we have sought in our format for the evening to share speaking time and questioning time equitably so things run smoothly so that all voices can be heard. The third one is, even though there may be times when a bunch of people in the same space have disagreements, we're going to try to disagree if that happens without being disagreeable. So expressing opposing opinions or challenging opinions in a constructive way. And fourth, recognizing the leader's right to conduct the gathering. And this evening, that is I and my 2 colleagues who are helping with timing and questions. So let us, given those ground rules, turn to our first candidate. We'd originally planned to host Maggie Goodlander, our candidate for governor, but we learned last week that she has a conflict tonight, and her campaign will be providing us with more information about how we can hear from her and join with her. But tonight, the first of our 7 candidates is Karen Liot Hill, our candidate for Executive Counselor District 2, our district. Karen, welcome.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. It is really nice to see people and also to have a chance to introduce myself to those who don't know me yet. And I think of the Executive Council as the top of the down ballot, so I suppose it all works out. It's all the down ballot tonight. My name is Karen Liot Hill. I am a 20-year city councilor and the former mayor in Lebanon. For the last 8 years, I've also served as Grafton County Treasurer. I'm really excited to be running for Executive Council District 2, following in the footsteps of Cindy Warmington. And since part of District 2 used to be District 1, also following in the footsteps of my Cryans and Ray Burton. On the campaign trail, I've been sharing the story of my mother, Lynn, who died when I was 6 years old. She had cervical cancer, the kind of cancer that's typically discovered in routine reproductive health care, the kind of health care that Republicans on the Executive Council have been voting to defund repeatedly. Now, when my father was left with 3 kids under the age of 7, he was able to keep our family and his small roofing business afloat thanks to the help of Social Security. Later on, as a young single college student, my daughter Marina was born 10 weeks early, and I was able to go back to college with an infant and finish my studies thanks to the help of Medicaid that covered her 5-week stay in the neonatal intensive care unit. I know firsthand the power of government to improve people's lives. It's why I've dedicated my career to public service. It's why I'm so passionate about government. It's why I'm so excited to have this chance to bring my skills, my knowledge, and my experience to the state level as executive counselor. So I will talk very briefly about what the Executive Council is, because I don't want to miss a chance to help educate about this most important but very obscure institution in New Hampshire, because I really want to talk about why I'm so excited to be on the ballot this November in this historic election. So the Executive Council is an additional check and balance on the governor. It's unique to New Hampshire. When I talk about it, I use the word CARS, contracts, appointments, roads, and services. Contracts, all state spending over $10,000 is voted on by the Executive Council. Appointments to state boards and committees, the commissioners of state agencies, like the Public Education Commissioner who needs to be replaced. And all judicial appointments go through the Executive Council. And R is for roads, infrastructure, the state's 10-year highway plan, roads, bridges, trains, airports, public transportation, all go into the state's 10-year highway plan, and that's the role of the Executive Council to manage and maintain that plan. And lastly, services. So it's a lot of constituent services, connecting people, nonprofits, municipalities with the right people in state government to get answers to their questions. I'm excited to do this work. I'm really excited to be on the ballot this November in particular. The top 5 people on the ballot, for most of us, but for the top 4 people in Executive Council District 2 on the ballot are Kamala, Joyce, Maggie, and Karen. It's historic. The first time in history that the first 4 names on the ballot will be women. And in Senate District 5, Sue Prentiss's district, it will be the top 5 people on the ballot. I am so excited, but I'm equally excited about being on the ballot with everyone on below, with everyone on the down ballot, because I know that when we elect people, when we send Sue Prentiss back to the Senate, when we send Stu Green to the Senate to help make a majority there, when we send back all of our incredible state reps, and I see we have some of them with us tonight, Tom Corman, Susan Almy, and I'm sure there are others as well, and I can't look too quickly, but when we send back our reps, when we send new ones, when we send Jolene from Orford, and we send Tim
Karen,
in
1 minute.
Burton, thank you, then we're going to be able to do great things in New Hampshire. We're going to be able to repeal the public voucher, the voucher scheme that is taking public dollars out of public schools. We're going to be able to not just protect, but expand reproductive freedom in New Hampshire and codify Roe. We're going to be able to actually make progress on housing and childcare. We're going to step up and we're going to be leaders in the fight against climate change. And we are going to be able to replace Frank Edelblut as the Commissioner of Public Education. For all of these reasons and so many more, I am so excited to be on the ballot this November. I appreciate all of the work that you are all doing. I know many of you have already been on the doors. I am committed to knocking doors almost every day between now and the election because it's so important. So I hope that you'll join me and let's make history this November.
Thank you so much, Karen. Um, Deb Nelson, do you have questions that people have posted for Karen?
I do. And I will just say there's a little bit of a conversation going on with people asking if the governor can votes as well, which I understand is no, and if he can override council decisions, which I understand
Yeah.
is no. So
Happy to talk about it. Sure. Yep. So
but I've got a question I want to ask you really, and you can add that in too. But the question is, if you end up as the only Democrat on the executive council, how will you work from that minority position? So address the others, but take that one.
Sure, yeah. And, I think Cindy Warmington has really been giving us a master class in this over the last 4 years, as she's been the lone Democrat. Um, and I think there are two examples that I'll give that I think I've been attending all the executive council meetings for the last year, but I've been following her, this whole time. And you might remember, so here's two examples I think that are really good. The first one, toward the beginning of COVID, there was federal funding for vaccines. And the executive council refused to accept those federal dollars, meaning that we were not getting those vaccines. They were being prevented from going to people who needed them. So Cindy raised such an outcry that ultimately the executive council reversed its decision and accepted those funds and finally, got those shots in arms. So that was a good example how she used the kind of public outrage, this external pressure. Another example that's a little different is another example of federal funds, $100 million of federal funds, stimulus funding that was available for housing. And the governor brought it to the executive council thinking that, assuming that he would have a 4-to-1, with the 4-to-1 Republican advantage, he would be able to just have the executive council rubber stamp his housing plan. Well, little did he know that Cindy Warmington had gotten in touch with the other executive counselors, pointing out that there were no provisions in the governor's plan for affordable housing. And affordable housing is a crisis, not just in District 2. It's not a Democrat or a Republican issue, but it's throughout the entire state. And so Governor Sununu realized at that executive council meeting that not only did he not have a rubber stamp, he didn't have a single vote. And so I think, that's another example of how Cindy has been effective. And I think my background as a city councilor has really prepared me for this as well. It's not partisan work. Most of the work of the executive council, like the work of city councils, it's not partisan. It's infrastructure. It's helping people get answers to their questions. It's looking out for taxpayers. And that's what I'm really ready to do. And just on the technical side, so the executive, with regard to appointments, the governor nominates. It's kind of like at the presidential level or at the federal level for the courts, for example, where the president nominates a Supreme Court justice and then they're confirmed by the Senate. And in New Hampshire, it's the governor who nominates and it's the executive council who holds the hearings and then votes on those nominations. The governor does not have the ability to then override. That is what the governor has the ability to, has veto power over the legislature, but not the executive council. So
Great.
Well, you addressed the two questions or the back and forth in the chat. You also answered in a way both questions that we had prepared for you, which the second one was about your service on the city council. And I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit and just talk about the ways in which you see the work being different. You identified some of the similarities, but what about differences?
yeah, well, I do think of the executive council like a big city council for the entire state. So I think there are a lot of similarities. So I think some of the differences would definitely be the scale. So that's a big difference. The issues are fundamentally the same. The Lebanon, the Upper Valley, we're facing a housing crisis. Throughout Grafton County, Merrimack County. I see people from all different parts of our area. We're facing a lot of the same issues. So housing being a big one, but also public education, another big one, and so I think the big difference is that instead of looking at this um, as a municipality or on a regional way, you have to look at it at the whole, even at the next level out at the state level. And the state, though, when you do look at it, the state is a composite of a lot of different regions. So even in my executive council district, some of the big regions are, we've got the Upper Valley, more broadly speaking, the Concord area, kind of big area there, and the Keene area, and the North Country, Littleton and up there. And so I think there are a lot of similarities and similar issues across the state. And but the difference is going to be looking at it at the state level as opposed to kind of from the macro as opposed to the micro.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Karen. We're going to move on to our next candidate. Suzanne Prentiss is running for re-election to the New Hampshire State Senate for District 5. Sue, we welcome you.
Okay, so I'm here, but it's working. Thank
Yeah,
oh,
there
woo.
you are.
Oh, nice to see everybody. As Martha said, my name is Sue Prentiss, and I am running for re-election to the New Hampshire State Senate, representing the 15 wonderful communities here in District 5. And I am, I think my experience 2 weeks ago with Deb Merrill Sands has me well prepared for her timing capabilities. So thank you. So I want to just talk briefly about what I bring to the Senate and some of the experiences that I've had and how that shapes my representation for you. I'm a mom, I am a paramedic, and I'm a longtime community leader. And as a mother, my daughter Phoebe, who's 27 years old, will not have the same reproductive rights, same reproductive freedom that I had when I was her age. And I think that's really important when you think about not just her, but all of our women and all of our families. And what we know is that when the Supreme Court ruled in the Dobbs decision, they effectively moved the power from the federal level to all the states to basically make the decisions. And we have not affirmatively protected the rights of women up to 24 weeks. And we'll deal with the 24-week question after that, first abortion ban ever in the state of New Hampshire. So I'm vigilant on those issues because I know the power is in the State House and we have to keep our finger on that at every moment. I also want to point out or want to just share that, my daughter went to public school and public education. These are two really top line issues for us. We all know is in jeopardy. It is important to me, and every day as a member of the Senate Education Committee, I am fighting so that teachers can teach, so that children can read, children and young adults can read the books that they want at school, to keep public dollars in the public school system, and to let kids be kids and play sports. So those are the things that, as a mom, I have not only experienced, but bring that value to the State House. Secondly, as a paramedic, I spent over 30 years working in between the field and emergency departments. And one of the things that we're taught in emergency medicine is to identify problems pretty quickly and then work to fix them in a systematic way. And you still have to take input, even in these emergency situations. And as I have been in the Senate, one of the problems that we're always talking, we rightfully so, we're always talking about property taxes and the fact that we have an upside down system and it's just squeezing people. So one of the problems that I worked on that ambulance services and municipalities wanted me to, and we were effective, is getting Medicaid reimbursement up to 100% of Medicare in this state for ambulance services for the first time in 17 years, went from 38% to 100. What does this mean to property tax rates? Well, that downshifting of those Medicaid bills, which was is the second highest payer in the state, no longer goes on the backs of community taxpayers. Right, it's on the Medicaid program. So this is a great thing for us, a problem identified and solved. Last but not least, I'm a community leader, 12 years on the city council, 2 years as mayor. And what I understand is that school boards, select boards, and city councils actually know their communities best, and they know that we're doing. And at the legislature, we have to be very careful about not overreaching into your business. Why is it that we as city councils can vote, or town councils can vote on whether you can play Keno or not, but we can pass a law or not pass a law that would allow us to vote on whether we wanted to have legislation that would allow communities to adopt an ordinance to put a recreation fee on hotel rooms that they could, $2 a night, that they could put into a fund to cover infrastructure. It's completely imbalanced. I respect the local opinions. I carry that with me to the city council, from the city council to the state. And I'm going to try to move along to just a couple quick things here that I want.
1 more minute.
One more?
1 minute.
Yeah, 1 minute. All right,
Yep.
quickly. In the last year, 14 bills filed, 12 passed. Because, and Karen talked about compromise, this is the name of the game. When you can compromise, you do. 2 of the bills that I am most proud of, one has to do with basically requiring insurance companies, not basically requiring private insurance carriers to fund a prosthetic device, an activity-specific prosthetic device, so kids can actually play soccer or skate, whatever the sport might be, that have been affected by limb loss because of cancer, because of a congenital defect, or because of trauma. They weren't doing that before. They are doing it now. And the second bill I want to point out, really important to our pediatric community, is having this monoclonal antibody available for families to choose for their babies and toddlers so that they can be protected against RSV, which can be a deadly respiratory virus. We didn't have that. And in an anti-vax environment, I was able to work. Now, this is not a vaccine, but they were suspicious. I was able to work to get this across the finish line to make this available. So I am pleased and honored to be running for re-election. I hope to go back and be your state senator and to continue to fight for reproductive rights, for public education, for access to healthcare, for building systems of care, all the things and much more that I'd love to do. Deb, I'm going to defer to you and thank you for your wonderful timing once again.
Thank you. You wrapped up perfectly.
I'm so glad my camera's working.
Beautiful.
Well, and the good news is that the first question we want to ask you is to tell us about the accomplishments you're most proud of. And you did tell us the top 2, so this gives you a chance to elaborate a little bit more.
Thank you so much, Deb. And, I talk about these 2 bills from this last session, but in the overall 2 years that I've been in, the highlight of all of this is working as the one of the prime sponsors of the Momnibus, which was a package, an extensive package focused on protecting moms and babies, really focusing on maternal health care. We had a situation in this state, we have it throughout New England, where we're seeing mortality rate for moms actually on the rise in this modern day. It's just not quite right. So we address that through a few different items, but most important is we have a group of moms who they just make just a little more money and they're not eligible for the Granted Advantage, which is the Medicaid expansion program. So this allows us to take those moms who only had prenatal care or postnatal or postpartum care for 60 days. They now have it for 365 days. So if you're a mom that's been struggling with addiction, with depression, who has had a postpartum healthcare related issue that they can't resolve in 60 days, they now have a whole year for continuous care. We're setting these families off on the right track. And I'll be introducing this year, sadly with the departure of Senator Whitley, I'm going to be the prime sponsor of Momnibus 2.0. And we're going to be focusing on our gaps in maternity access throughout the state. Thank you.
We have a second question I think we have time for, which is how have you worked to protect lakes and watersheds in our region?
Great, thanks. Another great question, hot and important topic. I was fortunate enough to work with the wonderful Representative Rosemary Rung from Merrimack. She is a champion for our lakes and for our water bodies, our lakes and our ponds throughout the state. And together in my first term, and then we flipped it into the second, we co-sponsored a law that passed that required a cyanobacteria plan. It's because this is a large issue through all of our bodies of water, and it is making them not only they're unsafe for humans, they're unsafe for our pets, they're a true threat to our water systems. So we got that passed, and then we went back to actually get some money, some funding to activate that plan. So that is one way that I've worked with a member of the House. And she also, she knew that up here in this part of the state, we have, we have equally as important bodies of water that need protection have been highlighted and with concerns about cyanobacteria. So that's one of the ways that I've worked. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All
You're welcome.
right.
Thank you. I'm so glad my camera's on. All right, I'll be
I
quiet
know.
now. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Sue. All right, we are going to move on to another candidate for State Senate in District 7, Stu Green. Stu, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for the venue and the introduction. I appreciate that. So as Martha mentioned, my name's Stu Green, and I am running for State Senate here in District 7. And I think most of you probably reside out of that, but just really quickly, if there are any towns that you tend to hit, it's going to be Grafton, Orange, Alexandria, Hebron, Bridgewater, Bristol, maybe Danbury, and Hill. But there are actually 22 towns in this district. It tends to be one that is rural and poor, meaning it tends to be at the wrong end of the funding regime when it comes to public schools and how we do that here. But I'll get to that in a second. I won't say I'm a native of New Hampshire because I was actually born in Florida and we crossed the line when I was 1 year old. And then I will say for the most important years, I was raised here in the heart of the district in Andover. I've been to a variety of public and private schools, went away to a variety of different colleges, and then eventually joined the Navy in 1999. I did 20 years, rose to the rank of commander, and in the course of that career, I did lots of fun things, including being an accredited diplomat in a U.S. embassy overseas. I directed a maritime intelligence operations center. I ran around in the desert looking for weapons of mass destruction. I've been deployed on multiple aircraft carriers supporting combat operations, and I've done analysis, counterinsurgency analysis. Weird for a Navy guy, but that's what I was doing for the senior DC Beltway decision makers. So I like to say that I know a little bit about leadership, a little bit about building relationships, and I have served with the men and women in our armed forces, pulling in the same direction, regardless of whatever political party that they were in. So I like to say I'm running on a unity ticket, but of course I am a Democrat because I align more with Democratic positions. But at the same time, I think I'm able to talk District 7. I mentioned we have a lot of Republicans here. There's a lot of Grafton, there's a lot of Andover and Danbury. Hillsborough and Franklin are our two biggest population centers, and those are pretty rough mill towns. So as a guy who drives, a diesel F-350 that plows his own driveway along with his friends' driveways, and I have a tractor, and I fell and I cut and I split and buck and stack my own cordwood, and my parents too. I understand some of the issues that these guys are going through, particularly the property tax issue. And that is, I'd say, right there at the top of my list, because as has been mentioned several times, we do have an inverted system, a regressive tax base. And my opponent doesn't seem to recognize that. He sincerely believes we live in a low tax advantage state. And he seems totally disconnected with the very people that he's representing. And I actually suspect that this may be the first time he's actually knocked on doors in this district, which is pretty interesting. Let's see. When I retired from the Navy, I became the town moderator here in Andover, where I got to put some balm on the choppy waters that are our town meetings. We had a pretty bad reputation, and that was too hard. So I decided to run for state senate instead, and that's that's what I'm doing now. But it is an education. I'll tell you, it's very interesting, this process. But my priorities, if we get in office, are to defend the Constitution. That's the first and foremost reason that I've run. I'm scared to death of Donald Trump and what he'll do if he wins. And if Kelly Ayotte wins the corner office in the State House, we have another problem. And the Executive Council and the State Senate will be the last lines of defense.
Stu, while you pause for a minute, you have 1 minute.
1 minute, got it. I think I can wrap up in that. There are lots of other things I want to do, including helping veterans with mental health problems, with PTSD, among other things. But of course, defending reproductive freedoms is right there at the top of my list. I'm a huge believer in the pre-Dobbs world. It's been said many times, my daughter has fewer rights than my wife did when she was growing up. We can fix that, and I'll fight to roll that back. Property taxes we've already mentioned, but also a key to that is supporting public education. I'm a big believer in public education and rolling back a totally unaccountable and unconstitutional voucher system, which we've already talked about. And then protecting the environment is really big. And I do believe that the logging industry, which has been crushed under Sununu, is an important part of maintaining our ecosystem. Responsible logging is a thing, and it is very important. Talk to any forester in the state, they'll tell you the same thing. And I would like to help out with that. And that's one thing that I think I can really talk across the aisle on. So I'll end on that.
Thank you.
Perfect timing.
Our questions actually allow you to elaborate a little bit about some of the things you felt rushed on, but we do have a question that has come up, which is, what would you say to men who feel cheated or disenfranchised in the current culture? It sounds.
This is really interesting. I was talking about this. So if you hadn't seen it, I had a spot on WMUR on Close Up with Adam Sexton on Sunday. And while we were watching that with my friends, I brought up the fact that boys and men are actually struggling. They have been left behind. If you look at the numbers of, in terms of matriculation to like UVM, for instance, the ratio is way out of whack. So we've gone from a world where women were oppressed and not allowed to get into upper education to one where, for whatever reason, and I think there are a number of possible reasons for it, boys and young men are being left behind. And I think that is leaving them vulnerable to identity entrepreneurs like, frankly, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Andrew Tate, all of these, forgive my French, these jackasses who are taking advantage of a very vulnerable situation. So we need to do more and figure out and kind of dig in, why are these boys feeling so lost? What have we brought all of these other rights forward at their expense? I'm told that they're toxic and that they're part of the problem intrinsically, or is there another way to handle it? And I think that we're beginning to open up the door to that. And I think I really appreciate what Kamala and Tim Walz have done, because they've brought us back to a center wherein folks that frankly look like me aren't necessarily. We have a space. We have a place. There's an example for masculinity in Tim Walz that I think is worth emulating there, and that's something that we can do a little work to try to repeat and echo more.
That's great.
Thank you. And you had started talking about issues that matter most to you. You mentioned education, reproductive rights, taxes or property taxes. And I just had the sense that you felt a little rushed. So I didn't know if you wanted to elaborate on one or two more with your remaining time.
Sure. The property tax thing, and I feel like we've got a little bit of incestuous reaffirmation going on in this very nice crowd here. So it's a little bit like preaching to the choir. But the relationship between property taxes and the way that we anchor support for our schools to those zip codes is unconscionable. And this, of course, goes to the Claremont decisions and all the decisions that followed in the wake of that. We have to address this. I mean, we had a system with SWEPT that was beginning to address it. It wasn't a panacea, but it was at least moving us in the right direction. So we have to take a look at how we do this. Because, like I mentioned earlier, the Franklins of New Hampshire and the Hillsboroughs of New Hampshire are the poster children of why the current system doesn't work. You get into this negative feedback loop where property values go down, so they have to jack up the property tax rates, which means people are losing their houses. At the same time, it's not enough to keep the schools going. School like Franklin can't even hang on to a math teacher at this point. So property values go down even more. And then in the meantime, you've got kids walking the streets that are bereft. They have no access to trade. They don't have wood shop. They don't have music. They don't have metal shop. They don't have, any, even frankly, extracurricular activities that will keep them off the streets. And so the property values go down even more, and it's just this insane, inescapable negative feedback loop. And it is very, very important that we fix that. My opponent doesn't believe it's a problem. He's really, it's interesting. You'll see in the interview on WMUR how dismissive he was of that problem. He thinks that what the Republicans have done the last few cycles in terms of cutting taxes hasn't downshifted the burden to the poor people. And we can call ourselves a low tax advantage state. And all we have to do to be that way is to say no to an income and sales tax, which I agree with, by the way. No, I've been accused of wanting an income and sales tax, but I don't support that. I think we have many more creative ways that we can better fund this state.
Thanks, Stu. I'm just going to interject here that, yeah, we pretty much expected the choir to show up tonight. That's pretty much who got the invitation. But one of the really valuable things about a forum like this is that you all are letting us know what we can tell voters about you, right? When we go to knock on doors, when we talk with our neighbors, when we chat with people at, events, we have some specifics about what you're going to do for us, and it's really helpful to hear it. So
Love
thank
it. Thank you. And by the way, just real quick, because I know we're running out of time for me, but there is an enormous wave of attack ads coming out against me right now, which tells you that the Republican Party is scared that I'm actually going to win this election. And most of what they're saying, if this army that we've got here of supporters goes out and encounters people on the doors or wherever, and they say, well, Stu Green supports an income tax or a sales tax or open borders or whatever, almost everything they've said about me in these attack ads is 180 degrees out from what I have actually said. So it's worth telling folks, beware of your source.
Okay, thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Marcie Hornick, candidate for county attorney and running for re-election. Marcie, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I just want to just start by saying how impressed I am about how articulate everybody has been on this forum so far. And I'd like Stuart to copy the "put some balm on the choppy waters" phrase. I'm going to see if I can't use that in a court filing at some point. My, focus is a little different from the broader strokes that you all focus on. I'm the chief law enforcement officer for the county of Grafton. Our office focuses primarily on prosecuting felonies, some misdemeanors, but we hold people who commit crimes accountable. And my focus has been for the last couple of terms, and the reason I came into this decided or looked to become a prosecutor in the first place was to uphold victims' rights, to hold people accountable for the crimes that they committed, to continue to make Grafton such a great place to live that we all enjoy and appreciate, but also to improve the communication and collaboration with the small town law enforcement agencies like the ones you mentioned, Stu. We've had cases from Bristol and Dorchester and I mean all around the county, and I believe that in the last several terms that I've been county attorney, we have been able to increase or improve the communication. I got to tell you, the state police has done just a bang up job recently of really being able to connect and assist with a lot of those smaller towns to help bring better, stronger cases to us to prosecute. So whereas many law enforcement agencies seem to be somewhat short-staffed, the interest and the drive, the dedication, the devotion is there. And that's just inspiring for us in the office. So I guess it kind of also follows that I have a really great team that I've helped create and produce. There have been some exceptions over the course of time, but those are the people that we all rely on, again, across the county, across the state, to try to improve the lives of each and every one of us. Me as a taxpayer, me as a citizen of Littleton, as a citizen of Grafton County. I'm not sure.
We have one more minute if you want to wrap.
I continue to maintain focus and will continue to do what I can to expand our mental health courts, which we have across the county: Leb, Plymouth, Haverhill, and Littleton. We have sexual assault resource teams, again, in each of those 4 pockets. In our mental health courts, we have veterans tracks to try to address the needs that we see from some of our veterans. As you know, the opioid crisis has not gone away. So we're dealing now with just an explosion of fentanyl and meth that we're seeing ravaging some of our towns. So just continue to work to try to do as good a job as possible to keep our streets safe and our county safe, but again, uphold the rights of all victims. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So one question, you began referring to it. The question is, what do you see as the biggest challenges you'll face continuing as county attorney? And I assume fentanyl and meth would lead that list.
Well, those are huge, but the other thing that we see, particularly with all this online poison, child sex abuse imagery. We've got a tremendous resource in the sheriff's department with a very dedicated group of deputy sheriffs who work to assist in catching some of these predators. And again, one of our teams is focused on that type of crime, but not just the drugs. It's theft, it's assaults, it's aggravated felonious sexual assaults. And so a big challenge is being able to maintain I hate to throw this in here too, a steady budget when we're challenged with pretrial litigation nonstop, when we need expert assistance. So I wish the crimes would stop being committed because I'd be out of a job, but I would be okay with that.
And do we have, Martha, do we have time for a second question or?
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
we have one in the chat that I think is
We
important.
do have one in the chat, and the question is asking you about the prosecution of Dartmouth students for last year's demonstration, and whether you can comment on that, whether it's a waste of resources was the questioner's question.
Well, so Mariana Pastori prosecutes for the Hanover Police Department, and she's under the umbrella of the county attorney's office. I think that generally speaking, anyone who commits a crime should be subject to the laws which exist. There is some discretion built into all of that, obviously. And so I think without commenting specifically on any of these cases, I think that you'll find that there is some thought to, I'm just going to say the whole process, to the whole, to the concerns of both sides. It's a challenging scenario for everybody in their everyday life. Students I believe, have the right to, speak freely on campus and whatever, but the school also had obviously some concerns. And so I'm saying a lot without saying anything, and I apologize for that.
Well, I apologize in a way for the question because I knew you wouldn't really be able to comment too much on it.
I was trying to get somewhere with it, but I
Thank you.
Really couldn't.
You though, I mean, it was a member of our audience who posed that question, so
Sure.
thank you both for
And
respecting that.
let me also say, if anybody ever wants to talk more specifically or directly about issues like that, I'm happy to take calls in the office anytime. People call me all the time. Happy to have those discussions.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We're going to move on. We welcome another member of the law enforcement community, Jill Myers, who is our candidate for county sheriff. Jill.
It's my understanding I only have 3 minutes, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, that'll go quick.
Signal.
So as she said, I'm running for Grafton County Sheriff. I do have a website. I do have a Facebook page. So I encourage you to go look at those to get some of my background and kind of what my goals and vision are. I was born and raised in Grafton County. I was born in Littleton, raised in Landaff, New Hampshire. I don't know how many of you know where that is. But I've been here my whole life. I went to Plymouth State. I graduated from there with a criminal justice degree. And I'm a mom of 3. I have 3 girls. They're 6, 5, and 2. So just a little bit about me. But I really want to focus on some of my goals once I get into the sheriff's department. And as Marcie mentioned, mental health is a huge crisis right now that we're facing, especially in the law enforcement community, but everywhere. It's everywhere. So I really would like to sit down and just look into how we can create more resources for folks that are dealing with mental health crises, and how more resources for their family members, and getting everyone the help that they need to get through times like that. Also, how can we take care of our coworkers? Because law enforcement, you see a lot of stuff, and I think that's a huge part of keeping a good team and keeping everyone strong and healthy is really looking out for everyone's mental health. And then also, how can we better aid the public? And there are training, actually it's roped into the academy now, mandated training on mental health, and every officer has to do it. Everyone needs it to keep their certification, which is great. And we need to continue down that, but we need to look into how we can use that more to create resources for the public. Another thing, as Marcie mentioned, is the drug epidemic, and that kind of ties in with mental health, the mental health crisis, and really identifying the underlying issues so you can really actually help those folks with an addiction and just getting them on a good track and getting them the resources that they need so they can get through it. So those are two big things that we should be focusing on, especially in law enforcement, and we see it every day. And then
We have 1 more minute.
Okay. I would push for a proactive policing, because at the sheriff's department, you are law enforcement and you can respond to calls. And I believe that that would be really beneficial to all the smaller communities that don't, like Marcie said, are short staffed. And really, if we're in the area, we should be responding to calls with them. And then another thing would be to put more emphasis on the fugitive warrant list, which is currently over 400 warrants. And really, we need to do better for our victims, and we need to hold folks accountable for the crimes that they've committed. And there really needs to be an emphasis on working on that. And then my last thing real quick would be regionalization. And just like I said, the smaller communities that have short staffed departments or no departments at all, just coming together and getting everyone on the same page. And especially with trainings, that would be huge to get everyone on the same page and get everyone training together whenever possible.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So as I'm sure you know, those of us who subscribe to the Valley News saw the articles in the paper this weekend about your concerns with the office, and there was a second one about your spouse. And I wondered if you could take some time to comment on those 2 articles.
Yes. So as Jeff Siegler noted, the Human Rights Commission matters in regards to the article on me are confidential by law, and as such, I cannot discuss or confirm or deny anything about those. And as far as the issue referenced with my husband, all I can say is it's really easy for someone to go into a court and make a bunch of allegations to get a temporary order passed. He has not been to court yet for the final decision. He hasn't even gotten a date yet for that. So I have all my trust in the judicial process, and I know that this will turn out in his favor. And in regards to the second part of that article, that's just a complete farce, and no one even asked him about that incident. It wasn't even an incident because it's all false. So I would be happy to discuss anything else with anyone if they have other comments, concerns. You can reach me through my Facebook page, my email, and then my phone number as well.
Okay. And I think that is our time. Am I correct, Martha?
Yeah, we just had one more question, which was sort of more general. Was there the question about morale?
Yes, I just didn't know if we had more time. The
Yeah.
We
question.
have time. We have another
Okay.
minute or so.
Oh, okay.
So why don't
So
we answer that question?
you had campaigned on a promise to improve the department's morale, and I wondered if you could tell us what your concerns are.
So as some of my, like Mike Tamilonis and Eric James had mentioned, the union that they're trying to pass, the sheriff's department is trying to pass, I believe that's entirely based off of the current sheriff's behaviors and the fact that they are scared that something might happen to them where he might turn against them, and they're just looking for protection. So I would just like to get in there and just be as fair as possible, follow the actual policies of the department, which haven't been followed as they should, and just really improve the group. Right now, it's a bunch of individuals that work there, and I really would like to see that be the family atmosphere that law enforcement is used to.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jill. Thanks so much. All right, we turn now to Mike Cryans, who is running for our county treasurer.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank you.
Well, I start off with this little picture because tomorrow is Jimmy Carter's 100th birthday. And this is back in 1975 in Littleton when he was running for president, and he was known as Jimmy Who, because most people had no idea who Jimmy was. And to the other person over here is Hugh Gallen, who later became governor of New Hampshire, but he had a hard time getting elected in Littleton. So anyways, I thought I'd just mention that. Again, my name's Mike Cryans, and I was 19 years county commissioner in Grafton County and 2 years on the executive council in District 1, which has now morphed, our area has morphed into District 2. And so both were great life experiences. In fact, last night I spoke at the Sugar Hill event, and I mentioned that when Ray Burton passed away, James Prindle, who is now with the Boston Globe, but he was with MUR, asked me the question. He said, many people say Ray Burton liked or loved county government more than he loved being on the executive council. I said, I don't know if he loved it anymore, but he didn't love it any less. And my point in saying that is that both forms of government are wonderful. There's nothing more close than county government. You can make a decision as a commissioner and walk downstairs and walk through the nursing home and eat lunch with some of the people that you just made a decision that would affect their lives. So the reason I'm running is, well, first of all, our current treasurer is giving up her job to run for the executive council. And so I threw my hat in the ring, and not knowing anybody else would be running. And lo and behold, we had two others. And I thought one of the nicest comments was at the Campton event where Corinne and myself were there, and we both said, no matter who wins, we think the county will be well served. And, you know, where you hear all this acrimony and sort of toughness between races, we sort of had a wonderful, cordial event. And Jason joined us here in the Hanover event. I think it also says a lot about what's happening. Thank you. It says a lot about what's happening in Grafton County. I was just thinking, you know, a lot of times you'd run for this office and no one would say anything. And now all of a sudden we're having an event like tonight, or we had one in Northern Grafton County, we had one in Sugar Hill, we had one last week in Plymouth, in Campton we had one. So we've been bouncing around, and I think the effort to educate people, to inspire people to work. I think one of the things we all want to do is work as hard as we can to get as many Democrats elected as possible. And, you know, it's easy sometimes to run for the office because I think the people that work the hardest a lot of times are the volunteers manning the offices or going out knocking on doors and doing all the things that volunteers do. So quickly, the treasurer takes the money that comes in for taxes and invests it, try to get the best rates as possible, make sure all the forms that are filed on time, and does everything that he can, or she, who's ever holding the office, to make sure that the things that are called for within the statutes are executed as well as possible. And with my banking background, I hope I can do that. And at the end of 2 years, people will say he did a good job.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I have a question for you, Mike, about why it's important to elect Democrats to county offices.
Sure. Well, so I think it says a little bit about, well, I'm looking at you, Deb, and you and I have similar color hair. I've been at this for a while. And when I first went on the county commission, I was the only Democrat in the 8 county offices. And of the 27 House members, we only had 7, 4 from Hanover. The last one who most recently passed away was Sharon. But we also had Sue Almy and down Cliff Below. And over in Plymouth, we had Sid Lovett. When I left and got elected to the executive council, we had 23 Democrats and 4 Republicans in the delegation, 23 to 4. We went from 7 And so I guess what I'm saying is the county has changed a lot. The jobs are you've got to run either a Democrat or Republican to get elected. I know some people say they shouldn't be. In fact, I had a lot of Republicans that told me when they had all the office, well, they never said it when they had the offices. As soon as they started losing them, they were saying, why are these jobs run as Democrat, Republican? They should just be open to anyone. And I said, sort of glibly, you never said that when you had all the offices. And I think the ones we've put in, whether it was Lara Sappho or Marcie at the county attorney's office, we've put in some wonderful people that have done some great jobs. And I think you work as hard as you can. You know, there'll be sometimes you look down this thing and somebody might say, I'm going to vote for all of them, but I'm not going to vote for my Cryans, or I'm going to vote for all of them, but I'm not going to vote for X person. But I still think as Democrats, I'm glad we have taken control after all these years. So, and when I say when I first started, that was the 1996 election. So it's been a while. So thank you for the question, Deb.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mike. We have one more candidate. I'm going to call this the foundation of down ballot. It's our last candidate, Chuck Townsend, who is our candidate for Register of Probate.
And Register of Probate is a kind of a weird office. It was established in the Constitution of the state, and its job was management of estates and trusts and guardianships, managing adoptions, managing name changes. So it had a real job at the time, but over time, parts of that job disappeared. And in 2011, 13 years ago, legislation was passed, which passed all of the responsibilities which were still remained for the Register of Probate over to the Justice Department, except the only remaining job responsibility is preservation of files, which is an important responsibility, except that responsibility has been adopted without legislation by individual departments who know that they need to maintain their files safely. And so essentially there's no responsibility left to the office. Still, it is good for us to have the job filled, and it is good, especially important, because we want people to vote from the top of the ballot down to every vote on the ballot. We want to have people vote from Harris and Walsh all the way down to the bottom of the ballot. Like Mike Cryans was saying, it is good to have the county also be represented by people who the Democratic Party has judged good workers for the people of the county, and it's nice that currently that is true, that we do have good people who are Democrats working in the county delegation, and we want to keep it that way.
So Chuck, that's the end of time. Thank you.
So it's a little bit more challenging to come up with questions for you, since we already knew a lot of that about your position. So asking you about your goals and ambitions, as well as what your office does, seems sort of silly. But I do wonder, I know you've spent time as a state representative, and I wonder the extent to which that helps you talk to your colleagues, or not colleagues, your neighbors, about the importance of voting for you, even though it's a position that has little to do.
I do talk to our neighbors, and it's a big responsibility for all of us to do this year, but I really don't talk about my position when I'm talking about it. I think that what people need to know is how important the top of the ticket is, and how important voting the whole ballot is. So that's what I talk about with my neighbors. And I have neighbors I really need to get to because they are very lazy voters, and everyone who can get out to vote.
So thank you, Chuck, so much for stepping up to that role. And I think what you say about talking to neighbors and getting out to talk to as many people as possible about voting blue from the top to the bottom is what I hope this evening has inspired all of us to do. If you're already doing it, this will motivate you more. If you haven't yet had time or opportunity or courage, it's not too late. We have 3 Democratic campaign offices in Lebanon, in Hanover, and Enfield. We put information about that into the chat. We have recorded this program, and we will send you the recording along with a lot of other information about how you can be active to elect Democrats like the people we've had here tonight. And work for that as hard as we can in the coming weeks. So thank you all for joining. Special thanks to the candidates for being, yes, very articulate, and so service oriented to stand up for the rest of us in this critical time for democracy. We really appreciate it. So thanks everybody for being here. We are going to finish up and wish you a good rest of the evening. Tomorrow night you'll be watching the debate, no doubt. There's a debate watch party at Salt Hill in Lebanon, and lots of other opportunities in living rooms across the state. So thank you for being here tonight very much. Good night.